Welcome to this webinar, the Open Voice Network. Hi, I'm Jon Stine, Executive Director, and we'll begin with the Notice of Antitrust.
This meeting is subject to the Antitrust Policy Notice of the Linux Foundation. Linux Foundation meetings involve participation by industry competitors, and it is the intention of the Linux Foundation to conduct all of its activities in accordance with applicable antitrust and competition laws. It is therefore extremely important that attendees adhere to meeting agendas and be aware of and not participate in any activities that are prohibited under applicable U.S., state, federal, or foreign antitrust and competition laws. Examples of types of actions prohibited at Linux Foundation meetings and in connection with Linux Foundation activities are described in the Linux Foundation antitrust policy, available at the link on your screen. If you have questions about these matters, please contact your company counsel, or if you are a member of Linux Foundation, please feel free to contact Andrew Updegrove of the Boston-based firm of Gesmer Updegrove LLP, which provides legal counsel to the Linux Foundation.
Nathan, thank you, and welcome everyone today. I'm Jon Stine, Executive Director of the Open Voice Network, and welcome to this conversation about interoperability from the Open Voice Network. As you know, the Open Voice Network is the open source community of the Linux Foundation. We've been developing and we'll be proposing technical standards and usage guidelines that, in our view, will allow voice to fulfill its economic and societal potential. And indeed, we envision a worldwide voice web where voice, the natural interface, will be connecting to you, to your content of choice, free of platform restrictions or garden walls. You know, we're talking about interoperability and interoperability between conversational assistants and across platforms. It's a central piece of the vision that we have, and it's our topic here today. And the reason is last week, the Open Voice Network published the first of what will be many incrementally revised versions of a guide to, and the title is Interoperability of Conversational Assistants. It's a new approach. And with me today are four of the authors and primary contributors to that paper. Dr. Debbie Dahl, a veteran voice technologist and CEO of Conversational Technologies from the Philadelphia area. Boris Volfson, Principal UX Designer for Nuance Communications, Boris out of Baltimore, Maryland. Kiran Kadekoppa, Co-founder and CTX of UX Lab. It's the Charlotte firm that's placing the power of voice commerce into brick and mortar and SMB consumer-facing industries. And our good friend, Dr. Jim Larson, veteran of voice industry and program chair of speech tech. Jim's from Dallas, Oregon. As we listen to this conversation, probably lasting 25, maybe 30 minutes, please put your questions and comments in the chat. We'd love to have a time to discuss those after our round of Q&A here with the team. And we look forward to this discussion. And let's start. And let's start with the big question, which is, why is this needed? Why is this important? I mean, we have four people here among many who have been spending time week on week working out this vision, trying to come to this first publication of a paper. You know, why is it so important? And let's start with our designers and developers, Kiran and Boris. Kiran, we'll start with you. What's in it here and why is this important? And then we'll go to Boris.
Thanks, John, and hello, all the panelists. Happy to be here. Open Voice Network comprises of 200 plus volunteers from 13 nations across 5 continents. We are from diverse backgrounds. We are practitioners from industries and thought leaders, enterprise technologies, software vendors with deep research and academic background. Last few years, the world has witnessed tremendous growth in voice-based services like speech recognition, language understanding, dialogue modeling, and conversational design. We firmly believe in the vision of worldwide voice web, where billions of voice-enabled services, digital assets, Internet of Things will all collaborate to perform complex set of functions seamlessly. To accomplish this, we need detailed open standards that are interoperable across services, devices, and endpoints. That's exactly what we are here trying to accomplish within the architecture group of Open Voice Network. Since it was announced Open Voice Network last summer, this group is on a mission to develop the standards, and this interoperability white paper is a step in that towards that mission.
Kiran, thank you. And you mentioned the key word diversity. Boris, what would you add to, the importance and the statements that Kiran just shared?
Sure. Thanks, John. I'm someone who really cares about the experience of real users, real people. And I know that people are very, very different. One way that a person solves a problem is going to be very different from another person. People take different paths, consult different resources, experts when trying to solve similar problems. When we try to create a one-size-fits-all solution to a problem, we're going to leave people behind. What I hope at Ovon we're doing is creating a world that can serve the widest range of people. And one way to achieve that goal is to empower creators to lean on other creators and to give users the ability to get help from experts that best match their needs.
So tying it to how humans communicate, and again, multiple opportunities for us to communicate across and through platforms, through assistants, and using voice. Debbie and Jim, you've been through the standards development battles. You've been involved through the years. Tell us why are standards important here? What difference do standards make, and especially in this realm of voice and potential interoperability? Debbie, start with you. Debbie, you're on mute.
I think a really good way of thinking about standards for voice is to thinking about the World Wide Web as a model. And if there was a really long time, about 20 years, between the start of the internet and the start of the World Wide Web. And now we hardly even have a hard time telling them apart. But in the early 90s, when the World Wide Web was just getting invented, there were proprietary ways for ordinary users to use the internet, and it was pretty easy. If you remember Prodigy, CompuServe, or AOL, and there were others, and they had pretty good user interfaces in general. They're gone. They were replaced by the World Wide Web. And why are they gone? They're gone because they were replaced by an open system where users could seamlessly navigate from website to website using standards-based web pages, and just by using links. So these earlier ones that seemed so promising in 1993, they were walled gardens. And if the content that you needed to access in AOL was actually on Prodigy, too bad. And that's where we are with voice today. The user interfaces are pretty good, but they're very constraining, and I think they're holding back the whole potential of voice. So that's why we need standards. We need standards to make voice interfaces as easy to navigate as web pages.
As easy to navigate as web pages. A key takeaway there. Jim, to you, you've been through the standards development battles. Why is standards so important here from your perspective?
Good. It's nice to be here. I think standards are important, and this one is important because it makes things easier. It makes things easier for users to help them navigate, get to where they want to go, to switch back and forth, to do what they want, when they want to do it, not be constrained by any artificial paths or constraints or rules, but it's just easy to use. Standards enable the interoperability, just as we can easily switch now between one Windows application to another by going to the bottom of the screen and clicking an icon. We should be able to switch between voice agents just as easily, perhaps by saying the name of the new voice agent and switching to them easily. We should be able to share data among voice agents. Have you ever noticed when you switch from one voice agent to another, the voice agent keeps asking you the questions that the previous voice agent did? What's your name? What's your address? I'm tired of answering those same questions again and again. Let's enable the second voice agent to share the data with the first voice agent and vice versa, so that you no longer have to answer the same question again and again. Let's have these systems interoperate together to make it easier for users.
Easier for users, Jim. A great point, and it's a key takeaway of interoperability. Let's go to some of those key takeaways. And Boris, we're going to go back to you. The paper just published. It's the first of many versions we're going to be working on. more than 50 pages. So it's not an easy read, but let's start with you. What would be the major takeaways you see from the paper? What would you want readers of the paper to walk away with?
Sure. I kind of one of the things I really want people to take away from this is there seems to be something really deceptively simple about the idea of delegation or handing off a conversation from one agent or entity to another. It almost feels, or it's tempting to think that it's lazy, but there is a very specific reason why we chose this this paradigm. And the reason is that the idea that we're trying to create is that we want to empower agents to be independent. We're creating these clear borders and not really merging the agents together in order to give each agent the ability to leverage its strengths. When you follow this philosophy, it seems easy. The only real or the major challenge here is deciding on what information we pass on from one agent to another to maintain a natural conversation for the users.
Boris, thank you. Easy communication, sharing back and forth. Debbie, what would you say are the big takeaways in your mind?
I think the goal is to keep in mind that we want voice assistants to interoperate. And we've said that a couple times before, and I don't think we can say it too often. So one thing that means is you can start a task on one assistant and then call on another assistant's expertise to complete the tasks, maybe giving the second assistant some information from your interaction with the first assistant. A good example from the web might be searching for flight information on Kayak, but then going to the airline to book your flight. And the airline hopefully the airline website knows your travel dates and where you want to travel between, because Kayak gave it that information. So some of the key concepts of voice interoperability are delegation, which is passing off control to another agent, and mediation, where the first agent gets the information for you. And I should say the paper doesn't yet have an answer to how this works. This vision is going to depend on a lot of low-level details that we're still in the process of working through, and hopefully we can get some help from some of the people on this webinar.
And all of you listening in, again, you're going to be invited to help us out and continue these conversations. Let me go, Debbie, back to Boris here for a moment. And Boris, you mentioned something earlier in our conversation about, maybe we should be modeling interoperability, perhaps not according to the technology, but to the way people communicate. Can you, give us an idea of why that's important? What's the guiding thing here on this, and then Kiran, want to go to you for your thoughts.
Sure. Beside what we already discussed, I think that there are two real strengths of modeling interoperability after the way people communicate. There are more than two, but the two that I'd like to highlight are when we communicate, we chain ideas, and this chaining of ideas gives this freedom, this flexibility that allows you to almost create this infinite canvas of approaches, of solutions. So this flexibility is one feature of the way people communicate that's really amazing and kind of is guiding us. The second part is that when we communicate with other people, we have an idea that the other individuals are really don't necessarily know everything else that we know. So there is this, and they are not always experts in all possible domains. So when we model this, our approach to interoperability, we are going to create this environment or this ecosystem where people get real solutions that they're familiar and expect. So there's this flexibility of human communication, and then there's also meeting the expectations and familiarity of people.
Kiran, what would you add?
Yeah, one thing I want to bring out is each of us have our own accent and pronunciations and such, but in spite of it, human language itself is a great example of interoperability. We are able to communicate, we are able to pass on our ideas to the next individual seamlessly because the common contract here is the language and the structure around it. So imagine if you could do it with machine communication, human to machine communication, that's game changing. And we believe with the standards, we are after really emulating what we do with human to human communication with machines.
I'd like to add one thing, John, if I may.
Please, Jim.
I believe that we, the people, are in charge, not the computer. The computer should do what we want, not the other way around. The computer should respond to what we need so that we can do what we want when we want to do it, not be forced to do things according to a prescribed script. That's why I think interoperability is important, so we can switch between application to application when the user wants to, when the user needs to, rather than being forced to do so by the computer. Remember, the user is in charge, not the computer. Let's take command.
I think it's a great point, Jim. The user is in charge, and this has been a user-centric effort. And one of our listeners just asked if we could all double check and speak up, because sometimes our voices are not coming through clearly. Heidi, thank you for that. Continuing the conversation on the paper, and just a bit of background here. Kiran and Jim, would you just give us a bit of just kind of the internal processes that were used to develop the ideas? I mean, this didn't come from whole cloth. Readers will see some interesting things in the paper, a very important section on jobs to be done that was really inspired by Olga Howard, one of our team members, and then a couple stories about an individual named Pat. Kiran, can you tell us about the jobs to be done? And then Jim will go to you about the value of telling stories. Kiran, please.
Sure. So before writing standards, we came up with real-world scenarios. We built personas so that we could envision how interoperability will come to life. We at O1 believe our delivered standards will benefit industry in general, but we break down the groups that are central to interoperability into 4 separate groups. Firstly, the consumers of voice-enabled experiences. These are the end consumers of voice-enabled experiences that engage in voice-enabled services, maybe web, maybe mobile, maybe agents, and so on. The second group is the enterprise content providers. These are the ones who create the content for voice-centric services and build the ecosystem around voice-enabled services. The third and the most important group is the technical or technology innovators for dialogue systems. This is the group that will enable all the other constituent groups to interoperate based on the open voice networks standards. And the fourth is the voice system infrastructure providers. This is where the content creators and the technical innovators will deliver voice-based content.
Kiran, check your mic if you would, please.
Yeah,
there we go.
Which are consumed by the end users of the voice-enabled experience. So these 4 groups essentially are at the high-level foundations where we are trying to build the jobs to be done for each one of them. And passing over to Jim for giving some stories around the experiences and the personas that we developed.
Please, Jim. You're on mute, Jim.
There, thanks, Kiran. When we started, we sat down and wrote lots and lots of scenarios of how users might use multiple interactive services, chat bots, voice bots, and so forth. And that was very useful because we discovered different ways in which those things can interoperate. from those scenarios, we derived 5 or 6 different definitions of what interoperability means. You can read what some of those definitions of interoperability are in our white paper. But that was very useful to understand what we need to achieve by starting with scenarios. And from those scenarios, we defined what the definition of interoperability was. And many of the features that you will see in the white paper were first noticed in those scenarios. So use of scenarios has been the basis of what we've been done, what we have been doing, and will continue to be the basis of what we do in the future. Because if we can't satisfy what real people need, we've missed the mark.
Jim, thank you. Boris, Kiran, Debbie, Jim, thank you so much. We want to get to questions. We've got a great group of folks on the line here, and it looks like a growing list of questions and comments. Let's wrap up here from our side. And Jim and Debbie, take us through what's next. I mean, first of all, for listeners to gain access to this draft, this first draft of a paper, and certainly the paper will grow, but where can you find it and how do you get involved? Jim, let's go to you and then Debbie.
You can find the paper by going to our website, the Open Voice Network. Go to resources, click that, and go to white paper. And you see there, just click and zap, it will suddenly appear. Get out your red pencil, read that through, let us know what you think. We value your feedback. This is a collaborative effort. We want you to keep us on target. Tell us what's right, but tell us what's wrong. There are multiple ways you can submit materials. You can do it privately, so we keep it confidential. We won't tell anybody else what you think about us. Or you can submit it in an open public workspace where everybody can see what you said and may even comment on your comments. I would love the second because the synergism of people collaborating and finding what things are wrong and what things are right is very useful to us. So please give us your feedback in written form through either of those two techniques. I should point out that in a couple of months, we'll have a online workshop where we'll explain in agonizing detail all about the specifications. At that workshop, we'll ask individuals to write down scenarios. That word scenario comes up again. Scenarios of how users will use multiple voice agents for their customers. How will customers actually use this? And try to develop some prototypes based on those scenarios. At the workshop, we'll also talk a lot about how to represent various kinds of data in the history that's very important to our work. So the workshop is first coming. Finally, I want to mention that periodically we will update the white paper. Our goal is to do it every month, and I will make our best effort to try to achieve that. Every month there will be an update that will reflect your comments, what you've told to us, plus new stuff that we were going to add from month to month.
Jim, thank you. Let me just turn to Debbie for some final comments. And colleagues, Debbie will be serving as our senior technical editor of this and further papers. So Debbie, what are you looking for in terms of comment and criticisms? And again, adding to Jim's good comments.
Yeah, I would emphasize Jim's comments that were any comments and criticisms and thoughts are going to be very valuable, both on the publication itself and on the content of the publication, what's missing, what's bleedingly obvious that we don't need to have. And I would also like to emphasize that we're interested in comments at every level. So if you see this very large document with a lot of technical detail, don't feel discouraged. We welcome high-level comments, low-level comments, any kind of comments. You can, the email is at, we have a groups.io email that you can use. And Jim also mentioned that we have an anonymous one if you need to do that. And you may also just join us, and we're happy to have new participants in this effort.
New participants and both positive and critical comments being brought forward. So let's...
John, if I could add, lurkers are always welcome to come to our meetings and hear what we say. But if you do, I will probably give you assignments and ask you to participate. So you may start out as a lurker, but I'll encourage you to participate and get active.
And we welcome all to join us, listen in, and participate. Nathan, let's go to, and let's take about 7 to 8 minutes here. And again, colleagues, thank you for your time today. That's the end of our kind of prepared presentation. But let's go to your questions, and we'll toss answers back and forth. Kiran, thanks, and Boris, thanks for responding on chat to the many good questions. But Nathan, you want to bring some up, please?
So just a question here from Stuart Patterson. What is your position vis-a-vis the voice interoperability initiative started by Amazon? Seems to me they're tackling most or all of the same challenges as they've been working on them for 3+ years.
And Alan, we'd respond in this way. First of all, we'd applaud Amazon, and we continue to applaud Amazon. They brought the question of interoperability to the table, and that's fantastic. Second, we see there's a distinction in that they've taken a step in a great direction, and that is you can have multiple, as we understand it, and as Boris pointed out, we discussed this in a paper, you can have multiple assistants on a single device. Fantastic. What we're looking for is to take the next step, and that is for those assistants to communicate. You may not need 2 assistants on a single device. You may be able just to move from assistant to assistant. It's a software approach from our side, a web type approach versus, if you will, perhaps a hardware approach and a apps on a mobile device approach. But again, we applaud Amazon's work, thrilled they're doing it, and see it as a very important step as we move forward to this vision of the World Wide Voice Web.
We also have a question from Heidi Cohen. Where are consumers, also known as non-voice oriented users, consulted or surveyed?
Heidi, we haven't had, and as Boris mentioned in his comment, we haven't yet had the privilege of consulting directly with consumers. We have, however, and everyone should know, we've been advised and informed by Vixen Labs' Great Voice Commerce Index report for the last 2 years that has spoken to the usage of consumers with voice assistants of their choice in the UK, US, and Germany. So that has been, and the Open Voice Network's been a sponsor of that research for that very point. So have we had direct surveys by the Open Voice Network? Heidi, no, we haven't, but we have been informed by the voice VCI, I can't think of that middle name, by the VCI of Vixen Labs, and that has been very useful for us. So thanks for bringing that up, Heidi. It's a great point. Nathan, other questions? Boris, I know you were addressing some questions about the definition of assistance. I think that good folks like Alan and others brought up. Do you want to just go on the mic, and forgive me, Nathan, for interrupting you, and just speak to that and where we are?
Sure. Sorry, I was trying to decide whether I wanted to answer the Q&A question as well. I'll answer it. The architecture working group meets at 11 a.m. Eastern time. But there is a lot of other working groups within OVON that actually, I guess the question is about this specific. So it's 11 a.m. Eastern time for an hour.
On Tuesdays.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. As far as the question around assistance, I actually don't like using the word assistant because I think it's both more loaded and less loaded than an agent. So kind of the way I've been thinking about it, and we've been thinking about what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of empower different agents, which are hard to define, but essentially are self-contained units working on any platform that you choose, and kind of covering maybe just dialogue or natural language understanding and dialogue, or TTS as well. It's an open-ended question, but the important thing is that they're self-contained and don't require us to explicitly say, this is how you have to do something. So that's the kind of the concept of why we think of an agent as kind of the unit that the different items can have a conversation between each other.
Boris, thank you. And Al and colleagues, on this topic, it has been the subject of robust and continuous debate as to how do we work this through. So thank you for raising that. And it's, I don't know, it's an open question, Boris, but it's certainly one of continued conversation on our side.
Jon, we have a two-part question here from Alan Furstenberg. He says, how does your perspective of the assistant handoff or pipeline compare to Bixby's model of capsules? And I guess, how does it differ from the intelligent agents model that, as he points out, has been around for 20 years?
Boris, I would toss and put that before you and Debbie. Alan, I don't know that we have a good answer for you here, and thank you for raising the question. But Boris and Debbie, any answers to Alan's good question?
I can't say that I'm very familiar with the capsules model, but I would love to see that as a question on our groups.io thread so that we can all share that interesting perspective. And as far as the intelligent agents model, I think this is the intelligence agent model. It's just we're trying to elaborate on how that is interoperable. I don't know. Boris has some thoughts.
Yeah, I can kind of say, so I'm not familiar with the Bixby model, but I'm going to say that the kind of the discussion around how to approach this was really about how stuck in a specific platform we have to be, or we want to advertise or say should be. So if the Bixby model says, hey, I can talk and pass on information to any other platform, and kind of the information, and each platform can use its strengths to solve the problems, we're probably aligned. But I can't say for sure. But kind of the challenge here is really the more common standard you have, the less flexible the standard is. And kind of our philosophy for the most part is we're trying to reduce the amount of prescriptive standards and empower the different platforms and approaches to kind of solve the specific problems, as big or as small as they kind of are within each agent, as they can be. I hope that helps. And I hope the paper tries to address this as well.
Alan, thanks for bringing it up. It's clearly an area we need to explore, but thank you for bringing it up. Let's go one more question, Nathan, and then we'll thank everyone for their time and go forward. But Nathan, a final question, please.
We have a question here from Emmett Coyne. Emmett asks, are you proposing a new rich language to be used exclusively between agents?
Yes and no. I'm going to say that there is the standards will be passing in information between agents, which will kind of the hard work is defining the payload and figuring out how to balance privacy, like technological limitations, and a bunch of other concerns. So I think the answer is yes, but it's not trying, like what I want to say is that we're not trying to, pass in the entire semantic meaning between one agent to another, because the way they would represent the meaning, which is kind of probably the biggest problem, is going to be very different. I hope that answers.
I could add to that. We will be specifying some messages that are sent between agents so they can collaborate and coordinate with each other. How these messages relate to the user interface, we will not define. The user interface is a very complex situation and will leave to individual developers to specify the user interface that they see fit. We don't want to constrict people into any particular user interface. So the actual user interface for interaction between components will be left to the designers, but there will be some standard messages that are transferred among components.
And if I could just add one thing, I that definitely is on our roadmap, but I think it would be misleading to say it's going to be a new language and used exclusively between agents, because there could very well be some things that are already existing and things that are not even necessarily restricted to agents. It could become incorporated into our messages. So it's not like we're necessarily starting from whole cloth, but it's on the roadmap.
Boris, Jim, Debbie, Kiran, thank you. And all of you here who have joined us today, thank you. And for those of you participating in the chat, a double thank you for the challenges, the ideas, the suggestions. Is exactly what we were hoping for. Again, as Jim said, bring out your red pencil. This is a communal group effort as we move toward the future of however we define a conversational AI of voice and chat and the like. Again, this is Jon Stine, the Open Voice Network. Thank you for joining us today. This meeting has been recorded. It'll be on YouTube and on the openvoicenetwork.org website. And we look forward to your participation, as so many of us shared here today. Again, have a great day. And again, thank you for your time. Take care.